Racism in Canada. I am dying to talk and react to this video. This Canadian girl here is talking about racism in Canada. She thinks it's really bad. I want to give it a fair shake and react to it. And then I'm going to also talk about this girl here from the Philippines who I like. I don't know much about her, but I've watched this video. I just want to share it. She talks about 10 bad foreigners in the Philippines. Are you one of them? And then just say, is that bad that she would make such a thing? Could I make something like that from Canada about people in other cultures? I think this video is totally fine, by the way, just spoiler alert. And she does a good job here breaking it down, giving her point of view from what I would call like a leftist or a wokish perspective. But I'm not saying that just to dismiss it or make fun of it. I want to just really dive into it and see what she's saying and react to it because a lot of people do think this way. I just happen to not be one of them overall. So let's just watch some.
Universal healthcare and lots of snow. As a Canadian myself, I am no stranger to this discourse, seeing people constantly pat themselves on the back for being less backwards than the States, especially after things like the re-election of Donald Trump and Roe v. Wade being overturned. As a slightly less politically and economically aggressive capitalist Western nation, Canada, for the most part, has also had more agreeable foreign relations, and to many seems like the idyllic place to live. And while there are, in fact, many problems with Canada, one of the most notable ones of late is the fact that, well, people are really fucking openly racist. Between 2021 and 2023,
Sorry, quick pause here. I mean, it's so remarkable to me that you can say Canadians are racist, which it's in itself is like it's a prejudice type comment, right? You're noticing a large group from your perspective are racist, and you're comfortably saying that. I don't have a problem with that, but the irony to me is astounding. And if you say, well, Canadians aren't a race, that's fine, but you don't like, I'm sure, any type of prejudice, right?
Canada admitted record numbers of new residents, hundreds of thousands of temporary workers, students, and skilled immigrants, many from South Asia, particularly India. And while again, Canada likes to see itself as just like this inclusive haven of multiculturalism built on the strength of the country's immigrants and acceptance, we're now seeing a sharp, scary increase in people just being like super openly and proudly xenophobic and racist against both new South Asian immigrants and South Asian people in general.
Trudeau really the country up good.
And the reasons for this racism usually boil down to one of 2 points. We're in a housing and job crisis. They're scamming us and taking our resources. Or they come here and don't want to assimilate. This is Canada, not India.
You think customers are confusing? Wait until your own coworkers act like they never left India.
The thing is, even though I would say most people are aware of this new wave of anti-South Asian hate, the second you call someone out on their slightly racist or xenophobic behaviors, there's always an excuse. It's always, I don't have a problem with South Asians, just the ones who don't want to assimilate. Or they just let too many in at once. And although as Canadians, we really seem to love separating ourselves from the state,
I'm just like, what is wrong with either of those two things to say? She's basically saying you've made two fake excuses, right? Like, I don't like the ones who don't want to assimilate, or they let too many in at once. I mean, what's wrong with that? I can't imagine. Like, I think she thinks she's one of these that think like it's a dog whistle. Like, well, you actually hate it, but you're making some clever excuse. Like, no, I've lived, and I've said this in other videos, for like around 15 years of my life in different countries. I speak Mandarin Chinese fluently. I know what's going on in different parts of the world. I know how people think. I've not lived in 20 different countries, but been to them, some for extended periods of time. And people all over have opinions on different groups, and it's just not a big deal. I'm not saying nobody's rude, nobody is racist, but a lot of people have legitimate concerns about subgroups of people, and she seems to be like dismissing it. Like, you can't say, well, a certain subgroup from this one place seems to be doing, whatever. Like, South Asians, a subgroup, a small percentage of them, but a noteworthy percentage are involved in criminal car thefts. Or, a less big deal but still annoying is, like, let's say lighting Diwali firecrackers out in a parking lot and leaving a huge mess. and just thinking like the cities will clean it up. Okay, that's not every single person, but it's noteworthy. And she seems to be saying like, don't notice anything negative ever, or else you're going to fall into what I'll consider a racist. That's the feeling I get. She can correct me if I'm wrong.
While doing my research for this video, the amount of parallels I was able to make between strikingly racist and white supremacist US media and the current situation going on in Canada were shocking.
Actually, I just want to quickly just play a little bit of this other video and tell me if she's watching this or anyone who follows her. Is there anything wrong with this, with what this Filipino is saying? I don't think there is.
It's because it takes two to horizontal tango. And I admit that Filipinos are often 100% complicit in the debauchery. A lot of times we'll go to bed with you on the first date. And when we do it, it usually means we're interested in having a relationship with you. It's our way of showing you what we have to offer. And I know that's a pretty stupid way of doing it, but it actually works a lot of time. And that's all fine as long as you didn't misrepresent yourself as someone looking for a girlfriend when you're actually just putting notches on a bedpost.
She doesn't like
If
Playboy.
a Filipina knows in
Fine.
advance that you're just a sex tourist, it's a lot less likely that she's gonna give you a tour inside her panties, for those of us that wear panties. But see, that's the issue, being honest about why you're here. Which brings us to the next foreigner we really need to avoid. The seed sowers. Some guys just feel this burning need to impregnate as many Filipinas as they can.
So she's talking about Western guys. There's 10 different types. You know, they go over there. She's noticed it. She's not saying every single one's doing that, but she's noticed. In every Asian country, every South Asian country I've ever been to, they always talk like this. You know, it not in a hateful way. They're usually very friendly and welcoming in general, but they notice stuff like, you know, there are these kind of party foreigners that come here and some of them do this. I hope you're not one of those. And they say like, this kind of behavior we like, this kind of behavior we don't like. And it's just not a big deal. And she just goes through, you know, person type after type. Doesn't really say where they're from. Doesn't matter if you're from Canada, US, UK, Switzerland. It doesn't matter. It's all the same thing. They don't really care. It's just like a non-Filipina. You know, this way of thinking so common. I'm very comfortable with it. I'm curious what people think. You know, I don't have a problem with her saying that. So anyway, that's the backdrop,
To say the least. So today in this video, we're going to take the time to unpack the historical and contemporary xenophobic and racist views towards South Asian Canadians, connecting real-life narratives of oppression and casual stereotyping to some of the most notoriously racist and xenophobic pieces of Western media. Because apparently facts aren't enough sometimes, and you really need to hammer it in via pop culture comparisons. And while there is definitely a lot of ground to cover, this is a huge subject, I'm going to do my best to make this video as digestible and easy to follow as possible. But hopefully through our discussion today, we can attempt to get a better grasp of the situation. Why is this happening? How bad is this situation really? And how can we attempt to stop this evil, evil trend of casual racism? But before we get into things, hi, I'm Emma Chan-Credle. Welcome back to my channel. It's so lovely to have you here.
Okay.
England in 1979, which saw a shift from the Labour Party to the Conservative Party under Margaret Thatcher. At the time, England was deep in an economic and housing crisis, and South Asian immigrants were oftentimes targeted and scapegoated for the country's problems. At the start of the episode, we follow Nita, an Indian woman making her way to her job. She gets dressed, walks to work, does her job as expected, all very standard stuff. Except for the fact that while working, she consistently receives hostility.
It is funny how like TV and stuff portrays this. You know, they're having like an attractive, clean looking person who the only difference is their skin color, and people are overtly racist, right? Like there are so many people from all over in Canada that if they behave in a very normal way and fit into normal society, other than a few really rude people, they will like have a great life here. And this kind of girl, just like looking at her, this isn't what people are bothered by.
From customers and her coworker Vicky. When eating her lunch in the storage room, Vicky mentions the unpleasant smell of her food, calling her lazy for not wanting to help a known murderer find shoes.
Everyone needs shoes, Nita.
How about doing your job?
During a break, Nita steps outside and sees Michael Smart, the conservative candidate for the upcoming election, who states,
Labour isn't working. Rubbish in the streets, crime on the rise, the character of your neighbourhood.
I, I mean, like, there is a lot of garbage in some places. Have you seen that whole, like, I mean, I hate to say it, but like, I know people that have actually camped and seen the South Asian pooping on local beaches. I've really seen, like, I know that this is happening, not to everybody, but I've seen that. Or just dumping oil from a restaurant, like down the sewer, or like Diwali firecrackers all over the place, or just certain things that are happening. It's not like really clean everything. And like the older generation of immigrants really did, they didn't like assimilate in every single way. They kept a lot of their culture, but they assimilated in those types of way. And people just like the Filipina that I showed, they're calling out some of those behaviors and not putting it on every single people, but saying like, or every single person, but saying, in general, we notice some of the stuff with some of it. We want to call it out. That's it.
If Connor McDavid and Connor Bedard
Get
had
rid of
childhood
this,
ambitions to
I'll be
become
done here in a
architects,
sec.
CIBC would work with them every step of the way. Or if they wanted to be mechanics.
So anyway, so we don't have to think about this commercial. It'll be over in a second here, but I mean, you get the idea.
Thinking of changing up your daily
Like,
skincare routine?
that's my
Start with a
basic take
personalized
on it,
skincare
but there's a
session
lot
with
more
new
coming up.
skin
I'm going to
advice.
show up an interview in a second.
Under threat.
Watch this. So she interviews, I think it's a Sri Lankan, I should put the link somewhere. Sri Lankan Canadian. This is a good one. Watch this.
second generation Sri Lankan Canadian who grew up in Mississauga, a part of the Greater Toronto Area, or the GTA, known for its large presence of racialized communities. And in her conversation, Shania shared with me some of her parents' experiences immigrating to Canada in the 1980s, which I would love to share with you right now.
Hi, I'm Shania. My family is Sri Lankan. They immigrated to Mississauga, Ontario in the late 80s. It was definitely kind of like a fish out of water experience for them. Like they, saw snow. They arrived in Canada.
And like when I lived in Asia for a long time, it was a fish out of water for me too. I mean, that's normal when you move.
Like December 24th. So it was like, Christmas Eve. They arrived to, snow, and that was like their first time seeing snow. My dad, I remember when he started like working, he worked in retail and he would have to like take the bus because he didn't have a car at the time. So he like would slip and fall like multiple times. And like when he was like traveling to work or like, getting into work, and eventually his coworkers would be like, you need to get winter boots. Like that's a thing that you need to do when you live in Canada. And he was like, oh, true. I need to like invest in proper gear. And then he didn't know that like jobs could like let you leave on vacation. Like that wasn't a thing when he grew up in Sri Lanka. So when his boss told him that that was something he could do, he was also kind of like, oh, that's a surprise. Like a vacation from like work was until he came to Canada as well. My mom told me was that she also worked in like retail when she started off working in Canada. And she told me that people would kind of come up to her and be like, wow, your English is so great. Like, despite, the fact that she's from Sri Lanka. When she tells me that that was something she experienced, she kind of like gets frustrated or pissed. And she's like, she would always be like, oh, like, in her mind, she'd be like, what do you mean my English is great? Like, it was like, we learned it in school. It's like not my first language, but I know how to. But I think that in like 1980.
I mean, I just have so far. I mean, she seems like a nice person. I would be happy talking to either of these two in real life, but check this out. So far, she said absolutely nothing negative, including someone saying, wow, you speak like that. That's an example of what? Some rudeness. Hey, your English is excellent. First of all, when I speak Chinese, people in China go, wow, and they say, like your 你的中文太好了,很好. They say like your Chinese is very good. Okay. Well, I appreciate that. They mean that as a compliment. They know that I'm not from there. They can tell by looking at me. Now in Canada, it's different because we have all kinds of races, but you can tell by the accent that someone's not born there. And she just said it's her second language. So why would that be frustrating? It shouldn't be frustrating at all. It's a compliment. Okay. Like we learn French in school. How many people speak great French? Most don't. So come on.
8 when they immigrated to Canada. I don't think there were as many Sri Lankan or Indian or South Asian folks that were in the GTA at the time they immigrated. So I think it was just like a different experience than it would be now. But I definitely believe that if they were to speak about it, they would say that the general public, I think, is a lot worse about immigration now, of course, in Canada than they were in the 80s. I think like they were kind of like helped out a lot by either like their family here in Canada that like helped them kind of move in here, or like by people around them that were, again, like as you mentioned, helping them to sort of assimilate.
And I think that
First of all, they didn't get a bunch of government handouts. That's what everyone says who comes from the 80s. So people are not upset about that. Okay. They work hard. They assimilate. There's not too many. They produce kids that's like her, who seems totally Canadian. Um, and that's why it wasn't so bad. There wasn't, and like we had, she's going to get to it later, but the point system where some people were brought in from like being a doctor or a lawyer or high education, and they came here, they wanted to be here, and they love being here. And that's why there wasn't such a negative thing back then. Like, just if you get a bunch of people that come in because they like the free hotels or the child benefit or whatever, and there's like no processing really, or you can like come in on a crappy student visa, and I mean to like one of these like fake schools, and then say, oh, I'm a refugee, and you know that the system's backlogged, and get free dental, vision, everything while you're waiting for years, and you don't really have any interest in assimilating, yeah, that's why it would be worse, right? It's not like people got worse. They've noticed it because Trudeau and his ilk changed the game in a very negative way, and people notice the difference.
this is a perfect example of what was intended through the creation of things like the Multicultural Act in Canada. The cultural mosaic was built on this ideal of respect and guidance, helping newcomers adapt to Canadian life without, trying to erase their identities. But as immigration patterns changed and public attitudes started to harden, this ideal sort of started to fracture. It's not surprising then that some long-settled immigrants or second-generation people sometimes distance themselves from new arrivals, saying things like, they're giving us a bad name.
The difference between Indians and there's modern Indians. You see, I'm a modern Indian. I'm very in touch with my roots, but I can also watch a good Adam Sandler movie, you know what I mean? I'm the best of both worlds. I love my chicken biryani, but I'll also go to my Mackie D's and get a nice Big Mac, you know what I mean? So if they're not a modern Indian, I think they have to leave Canada and get out of here, man.
As writer
So he's Indian, and he's saying, he's considered a modern Indian. Still huge accent, sounds hilarious. I don't know the guy, but I mean, she's saying, this is immigrants spitting on their own kind. And by the way, when I was a foreigner in anywhere in Asia, people that have been there for a long time, like years, notice that, oh, we've learned some things. This is different. And when we see people who just get there, and it's like some of them are, they act rude in certain ways. This is white people in Asia I'm talking about, or like they clearly have no idea what's going on. Like, people take them aside and say, look, you are really embarrassing yourself right now. Maybe I did this, a few years ago, but you really need to knock it off. This is like, these 5 things you're doing is really ticking off the local people, and that's how everybody was. Just to let you know.
Puts it, older immigrants often, quote, assess and critique new arrivals against the admission thresholds and benchmarks they themselves had to meet, unquote. And
that's excellent that the older ones are criticizing the newer ones, not negative.
While this is definitely a very interesting and important talking point, I am not South Asian, and it is not my place to speak on this issue. But luckily, in my discussion with Shania, we were able to touch on some of these issues.
You're not a white male either, and you're talking about that, so something to think about.
She was kind of referring to immigrants who have immigrated 15 years ago or earlier, or talking down immigrants today. And she talked about how it was unfair. And at the end of the day, that trying to sort of act as though you're better than them isn't feasible or kind at all. If you're trying to be closer to whiteness by talking down on immigrants who come into this country nowadays and try to build a life, like you're...
Again, for example, I wasn't being more Chinese in any way by saying to foreigners who had just come, like, look, these 5 things are rude. You shouldn't do them. I was still like 100% a Canadian, although I learned the language, which I thought was a good thing. But like, and I didn't think I was better than anybody else, but I thought things were worth noting. So this, like, becoming white. I mean, Canadian isn't about being white, but there is a certain way of being.
It's not going to help you at all, either now or in the long run. Because at the end of the day, I think whiteness kind of views everyone as in like the same. Because I have a cousin who literally kind of spoke down on Indian immigrants in Brampton recently, and she's Sri Lankan. I felt that that was absolutely unfair. And she would talk to me and my parents about it, and we would kind of like secretly judge her because at the end of the day, like she is brown skinned. When a white person looks at a brown person, I just assume that they would assume that they were Indian as opposed to like Sri Lankan or Guyanese or from Trinidad or anything.
So it's like this is talking about white people being ignorant because they can't look at any brown person and immediately know which country they're from. Okay. Well, I'm much better than average at this because, like I've said, I'm not trying to brag about it, but I've lived in other places. If you show me a bus of Asians, I could tell you with almost certainty, without even hearing the language, if they're Japanese, Korean, or Chinese. I'd be pretty good at doing Thai, Vietnamese, Taiwanese. Like, just not that Taiwanese would be more in the first category. Um, but the point is, like, okay, I can, decipher probably more than most people can. But when I'm over there, do you think that, like, Chinese, for example, they use the term Lao Wai or Wai Guoren, which means an outsider, like literally an out of country person. When they're talking about it, they're talking about white people in general. Could be Canadian, American, Australian, and then like French, doesn't matter. They don't even care. They don't even want to know. If you tell them, and if you don't trust me, ask a Chinese person, not like a Chinese Canadian or American who lives here their whole life, but one who's spent like 20 years at least in China. I guarantee you, they will agree with me that they don't even care the difference. They'll just be like, yeah, I'm talking about a foreigner, like a not Chinese. We have the same overall view. And like, what's the big deal?
But at the end of the day, I don't understand why people from other ethnicities talk down Indian immigrants because I feel as though we're all in the same kind of like space together, being like called an immigrant. No one cares that you've been in Canada for 15 years. Like you could have been assimilated here for years. At the end of the day, like
Yes, people do care if you've been assimilated for a long time. That is just totally untrue. Um, like, if I'm in Asia and I see like a group of white people who, like, imagine if there's a ring of car thefts and they're all white, that would be going crazy in their media and social media, and it would negatively impact me. Okay. And that's just how it is. And I would hate that. And I would totally support if they wanted to change their visa policies to make it so those kind of people were less likely to join in. I wouldn't want them there either. And the idea that like people don't look down upon others of their own nationality, they do it all the time because they don't want like the low end joining in and messing it up. It's not the people that are criticizing it. It's like not being aware of the problems. I mean, if you see like if you went to a beach and you saw people like pooping in a tent that they put there and they're of your skin color, like wouldn't that tick you off royally? Or like you saw a big car theft ring and you knew that they snuck in and just like, or got their visa in an abused way, or like putting garbage all over the place or in the forest, like a video I showed about like that. It's not like everybody's doing it. I know you're the type that isn't doing that, but wouldn't that tick you off royally, or are you just mad at any whites who notice some of that?
still immigrants.
And while hearing Shania speak on this issue, I couldn't help but think about the model minority myth and the ways it has very much shaped our understandings of South Asian communities within Canada. So let's get into that right now.
You're invited to
All
Niagara
right,
College's Fall Open House. Register.
I'm going to stop it right here. I will put the link to this video. I think it's, definitely worth seeing. I'm curious what people, and I hope the comments come from not only Canadians, but people all over the place. you know, I'm hopefully being fair. I'm not trying to be mean to either of these two. I'm sure I would like them as people, but I'm just very curious what people think of this discussion. And let me know what other types of videos you would like me to make. But I really appreciate it. Like, subscribe, share. We'll see you in the next one.